This conference will now be recorded.
Okay, so now it's recording. Okay, so we've done the poll. Thank you very much for participating in that. So the actual competency framework itself, as I say, I'm sure you're all familiar with it. You must be if you use it to help you in your professional development. But is everyone clear what a competency is or what competence is? Competence is actually a fairly recent thing. It's sort of come about sort of since the 1950s, 60s, but it's essentially the combination of practical and theoretical knowledge, cognitive skills, behaviour and values that can be used and applied to improve performance. Could also mean sort of be used as a way of judging the state of the degree to which you're adequately or well qualified and have the ability to perform a specific role. So this competency framework does that because it gives you the sort of guidance to suggest what level that is. Okay, so it's broken down into a number of areas, but before I launch into those, I'd just like to say that there are a whole bunch of general resources to help you develop your skills and competencies as a quality professional, not necessarily particularly aligned specifically to the competency framework. I'm sure you should all be familiar with the CQI facilities that are available. We've got the e-library with all of the documents available through that. It's CQI Wales magazine, of course, which is a big source of useful information. Branch meetings like this, and I hope you find this one useful. There's the new CQI Quality Connect, and it's going to be very interesting to see how that develops going forward as a means of sharing knowledge and information. We've got the CQI mentoring scheme as well, so that's another resource to enhance your skills and competence. We've got the CQI webinars and videos. Of course, you've got work colleagues as well that you can talk to and learn from. There's a whole bunch of stuff on YouTube, but you know, there's just thousands of videos out there, and I think it would take a lifetime to try and work out which ones are actually useful, but there are many out there. There's also LinkedIn Learning. For those of you who are members of LinkedIn, there's LinkedIn have a learning facility, and I know sometimes that organisations for which you work may have corporate membership or allow you to get the enhanced learning functionality out of LinkedIn. And of course, there's thousands of books, articles and blogs, magazines, etc. So those are just some of the general resources that you can get. I know it's pretty obvious, but sometimes it's useful just to have a reminder. So in terms of looking at these specific areas of the competency framework, I'm going to talk about context. So the competency framework breaks down context into two areas. So as it says there, product, service and process expertise and compliance management. Okay, so interesting. So product, service, process expertise is all about that understanding of the customers and stakeholders, making sure that you understand the organization's context in terms of the market, competition, that sort of thing, and you know what tools and techniques. It's interesting. It says has experience and understanding of specific and improvement tools and techniques, but it doesn't say what they are, that are relevant to product and service delivery and how to deploy those tools and techniques successfully. And of course, there's compliance management as well. So just make sure that what the compliance requirements are for the organisation in question, that those can be met. So we'll have a look at each of these separately. So in terms of context, some of the sort of the industry sort of facing side of things, basically we've got tools like well, industry specific knowledge. So a number of you know, earlier discussion talked about MOD. So defence obviously is an area of specific knowledge. And that's sort of teased out within the CQI special interest groups. And there's a nice overview in the latest Quality World, which highlights the special interest groups, or SIGs as they're known. So have a look at that if you haven't already read your Quality World. It's quite interesting, and join up if there's a SIG that's relevant to you. Horizon scanning, some of you may well have heard of this phrase, but horizon scanning is just a technique, or is sort of the ability to look ahead and look out into the world and see what's emerging in terms of your industry and technology, what's coming along, what are the new technologies, what are the new things that are on the horizon, what sort of research is being done about particular areas that that might actually be of value and helpful at some point in the future. There's all sorts of published articles, as I said earlier, but a particular source that I find useful, if you actually register with McKinsey, you can get a free account, and you can get the benefit of their insights and the research. They do market updates, so you can actually select which industry or sector you're interested in, and you can get a regular update email to you, or a link where you can actually log in and read and download the articles. And it's a really good source there. Stakeholder mapping, making sure that you understand who those interested parties are beyond just the customer. Although, as we've seen in the customer journey mapping exercise I have done before, determining who the customer is actually sometimes an interesting question. So stakeholder mapping, understanding the nature of the interested party and what their needs and expectations are, and the amount of influence or blockers that they might be. PESTLE, or steeple analysis. Some of you might be familiar with PESTLE, which is the sort of the political, economic, social, technological, legal, environmental aspects of a risk or an issue. Steeple just changes the anagram by adding ethical as well. So in today's world of social value, it's an extra dimension that's useful to take on board when you're conducting that sort of analysis. Boston Matrix, again, a simple thing for those in the markets in terms of products and services, particularly products. It's a way of determining where your product sits within the market. Value proposition canvas, for those of you who might have joined on my previous webinar, I touched base on that in terms of being a very useful tool to really tease out what value you can add to your customer or your particular customer segments. The Carnot model, that helps you to understand the impact of a product or service, and actually there's a nice little quality tool version of the Carnot model that's available in the World Quality Day toolkit, so go and have a look at that. And then customer journey mapping, well, again, if some of you might have experienced the session I've done on that, and that's mapping out, looking at what your organization does from the perspective of a customer, and mapping their journey across the various interfaces that they have with your organization, and how to improve service provision and the experience there. So those are just some of the particular things that can help you with context. There are probably many more, but these are just, as I say, these are just pointers towards some of the things that I've found useful, and I hope that you find useful. We pick any one of those, or a couple of those, and that's probably another complete session to do. But go and have a look. All of these different tools and techniques that I talk about, if you're not already familiar with them, go and investigate them and have a closer look. So moving on then in terms of the other part of context, which is compliance management. This is much more tricky, but how do you actually manage compliance? Well, first of all, you actually got to know what you need to comply with. So what I've done here is just to put some bullet points here in terms of some of the key areas you'd expect, some of the basic areas you'd expect compliance. You have to have compliance with, so company law, finance and tax, business conduct, employment, health and safety, privacy, corporate social responsibility, whatever standards are applicable to your particular organization, and codes of practice. And it's just being aware of those. It just depends on the size and structure of your organization. You might have specialists or a legal team that actually, you have the benefit of tapping into them, because they're the ones that actually fully understand the compliance aspect of your organization. But it's good to have a broad understanding, even if you don't need to know the specifics. So again, if you're a quality manager, you don't, and looking after a certified management system, you don't necessarily need to know every element of compliance, but you should make sure that there are people in the organisation who do. And in terms of making sure that you are compliant, just be aware that actually there are technology solutions out there that can provide support to people, to organisations. But of course, there's a cost, and sometimes it's difficult to know exactly, whether you need to comply or not, or whether there is a compliance obligation that you're actually unaware of. Just very quick example, years ago when I was at the Environment Agency, and this was for ISO 14001, we had to do the register of legal requirements, and when the Thames Tidal Defences started to investigate the legal obligations for their riparian rights and responsibilities, they actually found that there were a couple of acts from the era of Charles II that hadn't been repealed and that were still actually applicable. So it's quite an interesting one. So it's an area of fraud. So get the support of your legal team on this one. So there's not a lot more I can offer specifically on that one. So the next one I'm going to tackle is leadership. So this is really which is more about behaviours. We've got the particular aspects of leadership that the framework calls out. So quality advocate. You're more likely to be in a senior or specialist role to have the credibility to be a quality advocate in terms of what the competency framework sets out here. I think we should all be stakeholder advocates, making sure that we are acting as the conscience of the organisation and making sure that all customer and stakeholder requirements, needs and expectations are addressed. Not everyone can be a systems thinker. Some people it comes naturally, others not, but certainly when you look at a quality management system, you can't help, it looks across business functions and hierarchies, because when you take the process approach, processes tend to cut along across functional boundaries. So you have the benefit of developing a more systemic view of the organisation. Fact-based thinker, again, we should all be aiming to be one of these. So promoting a culture of decision-making that's based on factual evidence and performance measures and data, rather than people's gut instinct or experience from last time, whether that works or not. So yeah, fact-based decision-making is always a good thing. The quality planner, I think we should all aim to be one of these. Planning might not necessarily be everyone's strong point, but certainly we should be looking ahead to plan for quality and take risk-based thinking, what used to be preventive action in the old standards, to help ensure that we're actually getting the product and service quality that's the customer deserves. Quality coach, yeah, it's a difficult one, this one, because coaching is actually a skill. It can be learned. I learned to be a coach when I did some studying, learned to be a coach, and I put it into practice, and it actually worked. There's the GROW technique. There are a number of different techniques. So learning to be a coach can be achieved. Some people have more of a natural aptitude than others, but it is a skill that can be learned. So we should all aim to do that and help our colleagues. Quality motivator. Yeah, again, motivating people is a skill that can be learned, but I'm sure that you've met a number of people who are just natural motivators and get you excited about things and want to get on and do stuff. And then lastly, quality collaborator. Again, is one of these roles that we should all aim to be a quality collaborator and work with colleagues and customers to actually make sure that we're achieving the quality that's desired. I found this quote, I like this quote, because some of you might look at this and think, actually, yeah, this is quite appropriate to quality management, especially in terms of leadership, because quite often quality management is a place where people don't necessarily want to go, but they ought to be. And I think this is a very, very true quote from Rosalind Carter that applies to the quality management profession. So I quite like that one. So leadership then, in terms of it. So I'm not going to go through each individual element, but just some general pointers that to help develop as a quality leader. Have a read, if you haven't done already, read chapter 11 of the CQI's report, Future of Work, because it's called the Considerations for the Quality Profession, and it has a number of elements in there, some of which we'll touch on in this session, which are very much about the future role of the quality professional and the sorts of areas in which we could develop. And just remember that leadership is about people, it's people focused. Leadership and management, not the same thing. Leadership is people focused, management is resource focused, but good leadership always includes responsibility for managing. So that's a good way of thinking about it. So how do you do that? Well, you can develop by becoming a CQI mentee in the mentoring scheme, or be a CQI mentor in terms of that quality coach role, for example, a motivator. And if you haven't already done, maybe if you get the opportunity, assess your personality type and your preferred team role in terms of the Myers-Briggs and Belbin assessments and other psychometric tests that might be available, just to find out where you are. What are your strong points? And maybe those areas that would support you being a quality leader, maybe highlighting areas that you could develop and work on. And as all, if possible, attend leadership training if that's necessary, or you feel it's an area where you wish to develop. And I think also that look at the experience of others. So, for example, International Quality Award finalists and winners, they've obviously done something that's been recognised in terms of their leadership roles. So read up on them and see whether there's something you can learn from them, and other leaders or motivators as well that perhaps inspire you. Read up more about them and learn more about them, see what you can learn from them. And then of course there's other professional, in terms of leadership and management, CIPD, Chartered Institute for Personnel Development, Professional Personnel Development, I can never remember what it is now, and Chartered Management Institute. There are a number of resources available there. Some of them are free, some of them you have to become a member to have access to. And there's a chap on LinkedIn and on YouTube called Simon Sinek. I don't know how many of you have come across him, but he's really good. Watch some of his videos. He talks about leadership and behaviour and how to be more of an effective person at work and out of work. And some of the things he comes out with are really, really insightful. So just check him out. Might not appeal to you, but he's certainly someone that I've seen quite a few videos and found it to be quite useful. So again, it's just about really finding what's your preferred quality leadership role and being excellent within it, and then looking to develop those areas where you're not quite so good. So to be that sort of well-rounded quality professional that the competency framework really aims us all to be. So moving on to the next section of the framework, governance. Again, it's split into two areas. There's an external focus and an internal focus. Now, quite obvious. So in terms of the external focus, talking about the making sure that customer needs and expectations and views are established, making sure that all of the organisation's policies and process and plans reflect those needs, evaluating them. So making sure that external input and needs and expectations are factored into the organisation. And then the internal focus is very much around that whole process approach that ISO 9001 introduces, making sure that those external requirements can actually be implemented internally. And for those of you who don't know, governance, what is governance? If you look it up, there are a number of definitions, but it's the essential one is it's a system by which those who have accountability for an organisation direct and control it to ensure its prosperity, viability, and sustainability. And that works for public sector, the sort of charities, whatever, as well as private sector organisations as well. And it might also be interesting to know, some of you Some of you do auditing, you might well be already familiar with the lines of defense model, which actually fits within this in terms of covering both the internal and external focus. So the first line of defense for governance is the people who are actually performing operational activities, day-to-day business, managing day-to-day risks, do so. They do it effectively because the system of internal control is in place. Roles and responsibilities are set out clearly. The second line of defence is then management oversight of that day-to-day operation, so functional management, process owners, policy owners, etc., making sure that people are actually conforming and complying to those. And then the third line of defence is independent assurance, which can be achieved through internal assessment, review or audit, or external assessment, review and audit, or a combination of both. Depending on the level and nature of the risks involved in making sure that the organisation is governed appropriately. So that's the sort of general introduction to governance. So in terms of the external focus, yeah, I don't know how many of you are aware, but there is actually a UK corporate governance code. It's been around for a number of years now. Some of you might remember the Cadbury report going back years ago. It stemmed from that. And then, of course, ISO 9004 2018 is a good guidance because it's not the standard. 9001 is obviously the standard to which we have to conform. But 9004 is the quality of an organisation, the guidance to achieve sustained success. So all of the elements there that relate to governance and compliance conformance for the organisation in terms of what ISO 9001 looks for, there's guidance in that particular document. Risk management is absolutely key. It's fundamental to governance, and there's a couple of things that I've highlighted. A couple of things. There's management of risk, or MOR, which is one of the best practice series of publications, along with things like managing successful programs and Prince 2. It's the risk management approaches in those aligned to MOR. There's ISO 31000, the 2018 version, which is again guidance to on risk management. And there's a little bit more actually. If you look at the latest version of Quality World, which hopefully will have arrived through your letterbox within the last couple of days. Alex Maxfield has done an article on risk management in there, so have a read of that. It's quite insightful. Interesting, he doesn't mention management of risk as an approach, but he does mention ISO 31000. Again, stakeholder mapping is key here to make sure that you understand what the compliance requirements are from interested parties. And again, in terms of making sure we understand the customer perspective, the value proposition canvas and the business model canvas are both very, very powerful tools, simple but powerful tools for really teasing out the needs and expectations of your customers and the customer segments in which you serve. EFQM model, some of you might be familiar with that, from the British, from EFQM, represented by BQF in the UK. It's undergone a major revamp, completely redesigned after 30 years of the familiar 9-box model that some of you might well have been familiar with. It's now boiled down to a 3-circle Venn diagram, so go and check it out. You can actually download a free guide to the EFQM model. You don't actually have to pay for it. You don't have to pay for more detail, but the guide to the model is quite interesting, and it's covers a lot of social value stuff, United Nations requirements. Yeah, quite interesting, quite a development for those that might have been UK or European Excellence Award assessors, as I have been. And of course, from an external point of view, third-party assessment or audit, which doesn't always have to be finance, but many of the organisations require third-party assessment and audits of financial performance, but it could be your third-party certification body coming in to assess, audit your management system and your certification. So yes, that's the external focus. Moving on to the internal focus. Again, really here, these are quite broad, but this is, when you actually read the internal focus section, it's really about strategy execution. So your strategy and policy for making sure that your needs and expectations of your interested parties and the direction, and depending on the context of the organisation, is clear. And Hoshinkanri, which is strategy and policy implementation. Some of you may well have heard David Hutchins talk about Hoshinkanri. He's an expert in that. Yeah, it's a 7-step approach to make sure that your strategic goals are communicated right throughout the company and the organisation and put into action. Again, management of portfolios, again, part of the Axelos suite of program project management, management of risk, best practice publications, and management of portfolios as a mechanism of making sure that the organisations can balance the sort of the business of the balance state, business as usual, with change. So all of the change that you might have in your programs and projects, making sure that that actually can be delivered into the business as usual organisation to become the new business as usual, but without completely destroying it in the meantime. So business process management, absolutely key, and I think this will have to be the subject of another session at some other point. It was highlighted in recent webinar as an area of interest. So basically, business process management is what ISO 9001 clause 4.4.1 says, which is all the stuff that you've got to do to implement the process approach. So it's the means of actually managing the processes that you have in the organisation and making sure that they're resourced, that they interact correctly, you understand the inputs and outputs, and the risks and issues that you've identified in context are actually managed. And then, of course, internal audit, which is that one of the means of third line of defence. And of course, we've got ISO 19011, the 2018 version, which is the updated version, which introduces the risk-based approach to internal auditing of your management system. So those are just some of the key ones there, some of the key approaches that you can use to check on the internal focus element of governance. So assurance, again, assurance is one of those things. It's just one word, but it means an awful lot. And again, the Competency Framework splits this into two. So we have a internal assurance approach element of it, which is just that whole making sure that we've got mechanisms in place to make sure that those customer and stakeholder requirements get into the organisation, and making sure that actually you've got that balance of self-assurance versus independent assurance, making sure that all of the management intent that's set out in clause 5 of ISO 9001 is actually implemented, and making sure that you can actually address any issues that arise in terms of non-conformances, customer complaints, that sort of thing, and making sure that the appropriate corrective action is taken, and that hopefully you identify the root causes and stop it happening again. Supply chain assurance. There are probably people who are much more knowledgeable about this who are on the call than I am, but I'll just highlight a couple of things about this. But making sure that where you've got your supply chain, particularly we've got quality management system, making sure that they understand, suppliers understand the required customer and stakeholder requirements and can meet them. So in terms of some of the approaches that you might want to apply, and might be able to apply from an assurance point of view, again, management of risk is absolutely key here, making sure that that flow down of the risks is actually implemented within the organisation. Then you've got failure mode and effects analysis, again, which is a type of risk identification approach, which helps detect errors and failures in terms of that could affect a product's quality. Again, ISO 9004, it's got general guidance on how to develop a 9001 conforming management system. Business process management, again, is the means of taking strategy and policy requirements and actually embedding them into the business processes and making sure that they're operated and providing assurance that they are working. Again, internal audit, and again, some of these things will just pop up. There's a bit of a theme in some cases, as we'll see later. Problem management, for those of you that have worked in IT, you'll know that problem management is a particular part of ITIL, which is all about understanding, identifying root causes of things, hopefully before they happen. So it's actually a preventive measure in IT to try and identify potential things. So fishbone diagrams, for example, can be useful here to identify potential causes of incidents, to prevent service failure, for example. And then FMECA, FMECA, so it's sort of the FMEA, which is enhanced because it talks about failure mode effects and criticality analysis. So basically, if it takes FMEA on another step, but then in terms of each failure mode, it assigns a severity level, and then that enables the team to identify and prioritize those the potential causes, and it allows them to go into more detail just by adding that degree of severity by focusing on those that where there's most risk. And then corrective action, obviously, is making sure that whatever you've identified in terms of from the failures and the problem management, from audits and all of these business process reviews, FMEA, risks, all of these things, making sure that there is actually an action plan in place to do that, whether it's the old preventive action or corrective action where a failure has actually already occurred. So those are the sort of the key mechanisms or methods, approaches that can be used on that side of things. And in terms of supply chain assurance, well, of course, just making sure that ISO 9001 doesn't say too much, but it does have a requirement to make sure that the organisation should determine and apply criteria for the evaluation, selection, monitoring of performance and re-evaluation of external providers based on their ability to provide processes or products and services in accordance with requirements. So it's slap bang there in the standard, and then there is more detail there behind that. But again, 9004 can provide some guidance in a bit more detail on that. There is a British standard, BS 95009 2019. I am not familiar with the details. I know some people might well be, but particularly where there's procurement to the public sector, there's now a British standard which sets out the requirements for suppliers who are going to supply into public sector. The Chartered Institute for Purchasing and Supply, CIPS, makes available a number of guides, including making sure that procurement is ethical and sustainable. Some of it's free, but again, most of it will be available to members of CIPS. So if your organisation is a member of CIPS, or you have a CIPS member in your procurement team, then perhaps ask them kindly if they can get hold of some of the more detailed guides that they make available. And again, there are supply chain assessment tools, supply chain maturity models, for example. There are various tools that are made available by certain service providers. Again, some of these will be at cost, and it's you have to do the usual due diligence to work out whether actually the tool is appropriate to your needs. So that's assurance. And moving on to improvement, which is broken down into 3 elements within the framework. So it reckons that one element of improvement, which makes sense, is gathering insight. So just making sure that appropriate methods to understand stakeholder needs and changes in context. Evaluating measures and results. So again, it's just making sure that this is where the fact-based decision making comes in, that you've got appropriate performance measures, you've got the appropriate management information that can inform the decision makers so that they make the most appropriate decision. And then once that has been decided, actually improvement opportunities, changes, transformation, whatever it is, that the change can actually be implemented, and that we'll have a look at some of the tools and techniques and methods that can be used to support that. So in terms of gathering insight, again, this is Horizon scanning, this is where horizon scanning comes in terms of looking ahead to new trends in technology. Again, actually, if you think you could actually use the pestle or steeple elements, and you could actually look at the horizon scanning based on those. So that's one way of doing it. Depending on which market or sector you're in, look at market trend analysis or assessment reports. They might well be available. Certain organisations publish reports, some again free of charge, some of which cost. Again, it's horses for courses on that one. Good old pestle or steeple analysis again, help you gather insight in terms of the various aspects. So, you know, what's happening on the political front, the environmental, scientific, technical, legal, or ecological front, economic front rather, and with steeple, the ethical side of things as well. And again, with social value, the social value agenda is creeping into the workplace more and more. Steeple analysis, I think, will probably replace pestle. Good old SWOT analysis. I think probably most of us have used SWOT, the strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats. So strengths and weaknesses is understanding your current level of capability, and opportunities and threats are actually looking at the sort of the external opportunity, you know, the risks in terms of opportunities and threats that you could need to mitigate or look to enhance from an opportunity point of view. Benchmarking seems to have gone out of fashion. Be interested to know if anyone has done any benchmarking recently. But benchmarking, I see people say they're doing benchmarking and they benchmark results. Well, that's rubbish. They're not benchmarking. You can only benchmark processes. Because if you're benchmarking results, then how do you know that actually the means to get those results are actually the same, and actually can you learn from that? And there's the lovely story about the I think it was the FedEx years ago wanted to improve the efficiency of their flight turnarounds of their cargo aircraft, because the longer they were on the ground, they were losing money. They were only getting money when they were flying cargo around the world. So they wanted to improve it. So they did some benchmarking and looked at the performance of the competitors and found that actually they were probably the best, but they wanted to improve more. Then someone had the bright idea and said, actually, the process of turning the aircraft around on the ground and servicing it and getting it ready for the next flight is actually the same process as a Formula One pit stop. And so they went to actually analyze a Formula One team and how they organize things from the pit stop, and they managed to make process improvements, and that's real benchmarking. And again, the EFQM model has got elements within that which can help you assess and gather insight from an assessment. So in terms of evaluating measures, just making sure that really you've got the right measures across the organisation to support fact-based decision making. Some of you may recall some time ago I did a session, previous Welsh branch meeting on performance quality objectives and performance measures, and talked about Kaplan and Norton and how to develop a proper balanced scorecard. And you don't have to admit it in the chat, but if you've downloaded the standard 4-quadrant balanced scorecard template off the internet, you've not done yourself any favors, because a balanced scorecard can have more than 4 quadrants. The balanced scorecard comprises of the relevant performance perspectives that you will have identified in your strategy mapping. So I won't go into detail there, but it might be, again, another session worth repeating because it was some time ago. I don't know how many of you have come across Stacey Barr, but she is a world leader from Australia, world leader in performance measurement approaches, and she's developed an 8-step method called PUMP, which is a very simple but powerful method for determining making sure it's a practical and engaging form of identifying KPIs that are actually meaningful and measure what's important and what matters to inform, to help that decision making. And then some of you may well have used or come across CMMI or PEM and other maturity assessment tools. So we're talking about here understanding capability and maturity of an organization and its ability to actually deliver on strategy and policy. So CMMI, there's a whole range of capability and maturity assessment tools. They cover a range of aspects covering IT, process management, risk, portfolio program and project management, P3M3, some of you may have used that, IT, people, supply chains, change management, security. There's a whole range of these, but they're usually based on sort of the key processes and that you need to have in place to demonstrate appropriate levels of maturity. And the levels is usually a five levels, and they sort of around level 1 being initial or ad hoc. In other words, things are done in an ad hoc way. Level 2 might be managed or repeatable. So things can be done sort of locally, they're repeatable locally. Defined means that they're actually managed and repeatable across the organization rather than just locally. Quantitatively managed means that you're actually managing things and getting the results that you're seeking. And then optimizing is very much about that, demonstrating that you're continually reviewing and improving performance. So that's the sort of a very quick rundown on capability and maturity assessment models. And then in terms of improvement, actually implementing change. Some of you know that I'm big on the people side of things, and I'm a ProSci certified people change management practitioner. Some of you, so whatever the change, whether it's incremental, step change or transformational, it's all about the people. It's getting people on board with the change. And so you've got Kotter's 8 steps. Some of you may well have come across John Kotter and his book, Leading Change, which was written as a result of looking at the challenges of actually delivering successful change. And then following that, just over 10 years later, Jeff Hyatt introduced the ADCAR model and set up from the ProSci team. So ADCAR is a simple model, which is about making successful change. People have to go through the phases of change, which is awareness, desire, knowledge, ability, and reinforcement. So ADCAR is a useful mnemonic for remembering that change model. And then there is a ProSci change management process, which can be completely embedded and interlinked with portfolio, program, project management, business improvement, process improvement. But it focuses on the steps that you need to have in place to get people on board with the change, so that they say organizational change is the sum of individual change, and the proportion of business benefit is directly dependent on the number of people that successfully embrace, adopt, and utilize the change. So in terms of the change, that can be incremental. So we've got approaches like Kaizen, Lean, statistical process control, Six Sigma, which is like SPC on steroids, and Scrum as well. So Scrum is an incremental approach for implementing improvements. And then step change. We're talking here about sort of the waterfall type approach, the very clear specifications about what's needed, and that's where things like Prince2, Association of Project Management approaches, Agile project management come in, because step change is more about incremental change tends to be focused on processes. Step change tends to be about capability delivery. And then transformational change is really focused on delivering strategy and organizational change. So we're looking here at program management, so approaches like managing successful programs, or MSP, agile program management as an approach. Yay, systems engineering for those that do systems engineering, ISO 15288 and in COSI, systems engineering approaches support transformational change. Some of you may well be familiar with the systems engineering V diagram. That can be used to really deliver transformational change, which is what we're doing currently at BAE Submarines. And TOGAF 9.2, for those of you who might be enterprise architects, I suspect there aren't any on the call. So the Open Group Architecture Framework is a structure that supports transformational change. Again, enterprise architecture is not about IT. IT is one element of the enterprise. The clue is in the name, it's enterprise, it's about the organization. And enterprise architecture and business architecture, which are two disciplines very close to my heart, I think are ripe for bringing into the quality profession, because particularly business architecture, because we actually design management systems and they don't currently have a home. So as part of the 2030 strategy for more inclusion of different disciplines, I vote business architects. And I would say that because I am one. So that's the implementing change element. So that's pretty much the run through of all of the sections. And as I say, this is a whistle-stop tour, and I've only probably touched, it's like an iceberg, I've probably only touched the surface in terms of some of the approaches that people can use and apply, and some of the methods. What I've done is just try, hopefully you'll be familiar with many of these methods and things, but it's just to try and put them into context of how you might be able to use them, and demonstrate you using them provides evidence to support that you're actually competent as a quality professional using the framework as the structure for that. Now, I mentioned that there was some, you might have noticed actually that some of the approaches kept popping up in different elements of the framework. So they appear, it's not coincidence. There are some overlaps, and I've highlighted 6 of them, and I think these are 6 areas of fundamental areas of expertise and experience that we as quality professionals need to develop as we head into Industry 4.0, or the 4th industrial age, and Quality 4.0, which you may well have heard Vince Desmond talking about at one of the branch meetings. Excuse me, we'll have a quick slurp. So what are these 6 then? First of all, requirements management. We should be really, really good at requirements management. Requirements management in terms of capturing, understanding, evaluating and testing customer and stakeholder needs and expectations, all the way from strategy to product and service delivery. You'll find there is that thread that runs all the way through those 4 elements. I didn't put leadership in there because that's more about us as people and how we implement those 4 elements of the framework. But requirements management is something that comes up as a theme throughout, as is risk management. If you haven't thought about it before, quality management is actually the flip side of risk management. Quality management is a risk management approach. And that's really come through strong in the latest ISO 9001 in terms of risk-based thinking, for example. So it's all about making sure quality management is putting the controls and processes and controls in place to mitigate or eliminate risk. So they run hand in hand, but making sure that you have that ability to identify and prioritize and mitigate and eliminate those threats to the achievement of your objectives, but also how to exploit and enhance opportunities to enhance customer and stakeholder satisfaction and meet their expectations. So risk is not just threat, it's also opportunities as well. Next one, audit and assessment. I know these are sort of like the fundamentals of quality management, have been bedrock of quality management, and certainly IRCA members will go, yay, we're on there. But absolutely key to making sure that we identify the appropriate corrective actions and improvement opportunities. And more now, applying this from a risk-based approach is actually using audit and assessment as more of a preventive measure than a corrective measure. So the next one then is business process management. Dear to the heart of me, I'm a process anorak, have been for years. But again, processes are the things that take the customer and stakeholder requirements and turn them into action, everyday activity, to deliver the objectives of the organization and to meet or even exceed customer and stakeholder expectations, to meet those requirements, to make sure that the risks are eliminated or managed, and that with the first and second line of defense with process operators and process owners, making sure that the assurance is there that processes actually deliver what they're meant to. Data analytics pops up in terms of context and improvement. So analysing the data and facts that can uncover patterns and insights. Data analytics now is incredible. People do data mining, extracting insights from millions and millions of pieces of data to get insights that would otherwise be invisible, to help inform decision making. Being clear about that context and what's happening in the world in terms of customer needs and expectations, identifying patterns that again might not be visible to the naked eye just from looking at a spreadsheet. So data analytics is a very, very powerful tool, and I think more and more we're going to need more and more of these people within the quality profession to support organisations going forward. And then the last one again is people and culture change. We have to make sure that organisations have the right quality culture, and that's all about people and behaviours and values. And so we need to make sure that we've got the mechanisms that can support people through that change, help them understand why it's good to change, why is quality good, what it's about, the fact that actually it's not the quality manager's job, it is everybody's job, all of those things that we all say, have done for years, but actually making it real, getting people to understand it so that that quality culture becomes embedded, and people just do quality as part of their day job, and it's not seen as something on top of everything that they already do. Okay, so those are the sort of the 6 areas of overlap, and again I think they are sort of key areas of skill and expertise that we should all be looking to develop, or either within ourselves or within colleagues, or as a capability that we should develop within the organisation if it's not so good already. So very quick run through of the framework and tools, techniques and resources. So again, I'll just recap. There are plenty out there that can help us in our day job or develop as quality professionals. I'm just hoping that this session has pointed you to some that will help you on your journey. Some I'm sure you'll be familiar with, others that may be new to you, but whatever, go and explore, and hopefully you could use this material as a very basic map that you can use to find your way forward in this and develop as a quality professional. So I wish you luck on that, and I will now hand over back to Caroline for a very, very final quick poll. Thank you very much.
Hi everyone, if you can just follow the link again, if you get asked for the code, and the second poll should be available, which I will share with you now. Just fill that in while I do that. There we go. Just watch the results come in.
Don't be shy. It is anonymous. It is anonymous. Excellent. That's looking very encouraging. Wonder if that's the same 11 that voted earlier.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, that looks great. Thank you very much. That's very encouraging. It's really, I looked at the competency framework and thought, where am I going to get help to do that? So I thought self-help to start with, but I thought I'd share my thoughts with you. So it looks like it's certainly given you some new ideas. Yeah, it's great that a couple of you actually think that it's going to help you broaden your quality horizons. A couple of you say it's helped to understand the framework better, and where you can look for help. Fantastic. Well, as far as I'm concerned, that's job done. That's brilliant. So thank you ever so much for that. So yeah, just back to questions then.
Okay, so we have got a question coming in, and if you've got any questions at the moment, feel free just to type them in, or since there is a relatively small group of us, feel free to take yourself off mic and ask yourself in a moment. So one question came in under the leadership section.
Oh, yeah.
Under the leadership area, which leader has particularly inspired you, why, and how?
Oh, that's an interesting one. I think a very an influential leader was a lady by the name of Catherine Bryant when I was working at the Environment Agency. She was one of the regional directors, and the reason why she inspired me was because she was really good at her job. She was a lovely lady, but she commanded respect. She did what she needed to do, but she was openly very much a family person. She had young family at the time, and she did her job, but she didn't, like some senior leaders, just commit work 12, 14 hours a day. She did her 8-hour day, but she managed to get everything done. She delegated clearly, and she had faith and trust in her team to support her. She was very much a sort of servant leader, as we would call them these days. And I think she was inspiring because she was just very normal, down-to-earth person, but she was really good at being a leader. She was just one of these sort of natural leaders. So yeah, thinking about it, she did inspire me. And I think leaders should be there to support their teams. I think the days of command and control are gone, except in the military where that's necessary. But I'm sure those in work in the mod also know that actually there are times when it doesn't work that way, and individuals have to become leaders when the time comes. So yeah, that's my answer. I hope that's interesting question. Thank you.
Thanks, Ian. Just got a couple of comments just saying thank you very much, and really great ideas of how to try out the tools, and also really helped understanding the different elements of the competency framework. So that is very helpful for everyone. Has anyone got any more questions, or is it just food for thought of how you can use the competency framework?
No, gone very quiet. All stunned into silence. Oh dear.
Busy mulling over. So this event has. Oh, I've got a question coming here. What are the most effective methods that affect change of culture?
Oh, change culture. Changing culture is really difficult. It tends to take a long time, but I think there are a number of factors. There isn't a simple answer to that one. I think having a structured approach to the people side of change helps. Having clear values in terms of the expected levels of behaviour, having leaders that are role models of the culture that they want to see. It's very difficult. You can't actually measure culture per se, but what you can do is identify sort of proxies, if you like, indicators of how you want the culture to be. So you can describe that. I did a piece of work when I was with Devon and Somerset Fire and Rescue Service to develop their target operating model, and included in that the culture. So what sort of culture did they want as a fire and rescue service moving ahead? So it was how people expected to be. So being able to say no sometimes, for example. How do you make that happen? How do people how do you get people to have the confidence to actually say no to something if they're asked to do something, if they believe it's not the right thing to do? You have to develop trust, and again, a lot of this comes down to leadership and role modeling. Leaders need to be role models of the culture that they want the rest of the organisation to have, and quite often this is where culture change fails, because change requires change, and that change usually means starting at the top. But unfortunately, the nature of people who are at the top of the organisation is that they quite often quite egotistic, and they don't need to change because they didn't get where they are by some sort of, you know, fairy sort of type of values or behaviours. Oh no, you know, so it's a difficult one. Culture change does take time, but I think quality professionals can be not necessarily leaders of change, but I think we can be catalysts of change at the very least. So we can help people change and change culture for the better. So a bit of a long-winded answer, but it's a tricky one.
I think one of the best ways of introducing change, to keep it clear and simple, I think if people have got a mindset of sort of best practice, I think that sort of encapsulates so much of the standards that we work to. If we're always constantly working to best practice, I think that's such a good example. And then, you know, as people that we work with and in industry, if they can look at us and sort of model what we're doing, as long as the leaders are working to best practice, it's obviously going to work its way through. Yeah, I think those are a couple of guidelines that I've always tried to keep focused on, you know.
Yeah, best practice is always a good thing to encourage, but also we should make sure that following best practice blindly doesn't stifle innovation and creativity and new ideas for doing things as well. So it's again, it's one of those things. It's for me, it's always about striking a balance, and that's it's a tricky one. I think we're in as quality professionals, we're sort of in a not really sort of caught, if like, between a rock and a hard place. I think we're at the node or nexus between customers and stakeholders and the organisation, and I think we're in a almost unique position to be able to support the organisation and support customers and stakeholders at the same time, and make sure that we manage that relationship between the two.
I've just had one final question in, if you're happy to take it, Ian.
Sure.
I have been a quality manager for a small firm for a number of years. I'm looking to widen my horizons and move on. What advice would you give to someone starting a new journey in the quality profession?
Oh, I think we could open that up. I don't necessarily think I should necessarily be the only one who could answer that one. Yeah, because I mean, starting as a quality professional, looking to move on. I mean, like, I'm sure some of us on the call, for me included, I didn't actually start in the quality profession. I sort of ended up in it. It was a journey, and it was an unknown destination at the time. I didn't specifically go into quality per se. So I think it depends. Quality is a very broad church, so I think there's plenty of scope for developing, your profession or vocational skills and experience in different aspects of quality. Anyone else got any views or thoughts and ideas to help?
Something that might be helpful, Helen, is our mentoring scheme. We quite often find that when people are looking to move on in a job or move up our grades within the CQI, joining the mentoring scheme and becoming a mentee and getting a mentor can help with that transition. So that might be something worth looking into.
Yeah, definitely. But as I say, don't necessarily restrict yourself to quality. As I say, there could be quality related areas of work that you could broaden your horizons into. As I say, so don't necessarily label yourself with quality, because that could be restricting, and you might miss out on opportunities to diversify. But again, as Caroline said, the mentoring scheme has got people there who can advise on that sort of thing. Anything else?
Who's had another one? So I'll just ask this question. That could be the final one of the evening to wrap up on. So what skills or attributes do you see quality professionals needing in order to handle mature management / leadership characters with a strong financial mindset?
That's always a tricky one, isn't it? Yeah. Results. Focus on results. Always focus on results. So don't go in and say, I'm going to do this activity or whatever. Focus on what are the senior leaders actually interested in. Usually it's the bottom line, even in public sector. So focus on bottom line and outcomes. So what will actually be achieved? And actually in your head, develop a business case approach. You don't have to develop, I don't mean a full-blown 90-page document. It's just a succinct business case in terms of what is it that you're proposing, what will be the benefit to the organization, what will be the benefit to the leader or leaders in question, how will they benefit, how do they need to be involved, and ask, and think about the cost, in terms the sort of the return on investment. So focus on that. It's all about results. What will actually be achieved? If you go in there and just asking about, I want to do this activity, or it'll be a good idea if, you'll just, they'll just, they won't be interested. But if you go in and say, right, we can do this, we can get these results, these are the benefits, and this is the business case, essentially the figures that back it up. Then again, it's part of that fact-based decision making, and giving performance measures and focusing on results. That's what I would say. Any other contributions from experience elsewhere?
I think we've got someone says, be honest with mature management. Even if they don't like your opinion, they will value your frankness.
Yes, definitely. Always be honest. They'll catch you out if you're not. It could be too costly in the
end. Lovely. Thank you, everyone. I will just pass you over to Derek to close the event for the evening.
Okay, well, we'd just like to thank you again, Ian, for tonight. It was a really good presentation for all the work that you put into it, and I'm sure it's helped people with their careers, pointing them in the right direction. So I'd just like to say a big thank you for all the effort, and for you, Caroline, for coordinating it as well. And we look forward to having you again in the Wales branch, probably the beginning of next year sometime, Ian. And if you can come up with some topic that we would, really appreciate and find useful, then if you can let me know. I think you mentioned one or two in the past. So if you can text me, and then we can select something for the new year, hopefully. So
that's possible. Yeah, but also if people are on the call, Wales branch members have got anything of particular interest that I've talked through today or mentioned, perhaps we could do a follow-up session and go into a bit more detail. That's always a possibility. So it'd be good if we could do something that the branch members particularly found, would like to go into a bit more detail. I'll certainly do my best.
And doing it on this type of medium isn't the best, but as I say, it is much better than not doing anything. So it's never quite straightforward. It can be a bit awkward and a bit messy, but as I say, I think the more that it's done, the better it's going to get. So yeah. Well, I hope everybody stays safe, and we'll all meet again hopefully in a couple of months' time. Thanks a lot. Okay, thank you, Ian. Thank you, Caroline.
Thanks very much, Derek.
Thanks,
Take care,
Derek.
everyone. Thanks for joining us tonight. Yeah, thank you very much. Bye-bye for now.
Good night, everyone.
Bye.
Bye.